When you watch Suits the pace of justice feels like it was built for Netflix binging. $1 billion lawsuit settled in 42 minutes, just in time for the credits to roll. A complicated merger with international corporations, shady contracts, and a mountain of paperwork. Don't worry, Harvey Specter and Mike Ross will close that deal before their scotch even gets warm. It's fast, exciting, and deeply satisfying to watch. But if you've ever stepped foot inside a real courtroom or glanced at an actual case docket, you'll know that the legal system doesn't sprint. It crawls. In reality, lawsuits take months and often years to resolve, even the simple ones. Filing a complaint is just the starting line. After that, the opposing party gets weeks, sometimes months to respond. Then comes motions, hearings, and the ever-dreaded process of discovery. Every single stage comes with its own deadlines, extensions, and procedural wrangling. And unlike on television, there's no dramatic judge banging a gavel every 5 minutes. Most judges don't even like gavels. Instead, you'll get scheduling orders, continuances, and status conferences that feel like watching paint dry. Take a corporate lawsuit in the real world. You're not just looking at one contract and one smoking gun email like you see in Suits *. You're looking at tens of thousands of documents, multiple depositions, expert witnesses, and sometimes years of pretrial maneuvering before anyone even considers stepping into a courtroom. Even the fastest litigation is a marathon, not a sprint. The only time you see lawyers moving with TV-style urgency is when a deadline is looming, and that urgency looks less like Harvey Specter adjusting his tie and more like a frazzled associate surviving on coffee at 3 a.m. Another big difference is the decision-making process. In Suits a client shows up, drops a problem, and within an hour, Harvey has solved it with a dazzling legal maneuver. In reality, clients deliberate. Boards of directors meet, risk assessments are made, insurance companies get involved, everyone wants memos, opinions, and time to think. The law isn't just about finding an answer, it's about persuading multiple layers of people that your answer is worth betting millions of dollars on. And that persuasion process takes time, lots of it. Even courts themselves move slowly because they're overwhelmed. Judges handle hundreds, sometimes thousands of cases. Clerks have stacks of motions to process. And unlike on TV, where every case seems to involve only 2 lawyers and 1 judge, the real system has crowded dockets and backlogs that can push trial dates out by months or even years. Justice delayed may be justice denied, but in the real world, justice is almost always delayed. So while Suits gives you the adrenaline rush of instant legal victories, the reality is far more tedious, and maybe that's the point. Television condenses years of legal strategy into 40 minutes because no one would watch a show about 6 months of scheduling conferences and 2 years of waiting for discovery deadlines. Real law is slow, procedural, and sometimes painfully boring. But that's also what makes the victories so meaningful when they finally come. Because in the real system, unlike in TV drama, justice isn't about speed, it's about endurance. One of the most captivating elements of Suits is the genius of Mike Ross. He's not just smart, he's a walking legal encyclopedia. With his photographic memory, he recalls statutes, case law, and obscure footnotes with the precision of a search engine. It's a brilliant narrative device, and it makes for great television. But here's the truth. Real lawyers don't have photographic memory, and they don't need to. In fact, the idea that law is about memorizing rules is one of the biggest misconceptions about the profession. Law is not Jeopardy! You don't win cases because you can spit out the exact wording of a statute from memory. You win cases because you know how to find the right authority, how to apply it to the facts, and how to argue persuasively to a judge or jury. That's the real skill, Research is the bread and butter of legal practice. Lawyers spend hours in databases like Westlaw or Lexis, combing through precedents, finding decisions that support their client's position. And let's be honest, no one memorizes all of that. The U.S. Code alone has more than 50 titles covering thousands of laws. Add in state statutes, regulations, and countless court opinions, and you quickly realize that no human brain, no matter how gifted, could store it all. In reality, what separates a good lawyer from a bad one isn't a photographic memory, but judgment, the ability to know where to look, which cases matter, and how to frame them in a way that convinces the decision maker. It's the art of cutting through mountains of information to find the few nuggets that actually make a difference. It's not about remembering everything, it's about knowing what matters, and here's another thing television glosses over: memory doesn't guarantee victory. The law is not a multiple-choice test where the right answer is sitting in your head waiting to be recalled. It's adversarial. Both sides present arguments, sometimes using the same laws, and the outcome depends on interpretation, context, and persuasion. A photographic memory might help you cite a case instantly, but it won't help you navigate the gray areas where most real legal battles are fought. Think about the actual practice of law. In a courtroom, if a lawyer needs to reference a rule or statute, they pull out a binder, open their laptop, or simply ask the court for a moment to provide the citation. No one expects lawyers to recall every case word for word. What judges care about is whether your argument makes sense and whether your sources back it up. Theatrics might play on TV, but accuracy and reasoning win in real life. Mike Ross's memory works on television because it makes him instantly impressive. It gives viewers the thrill of watching someone outsmart everyone else in the room. But in the real world, memorization without context is just trivia. What matters in law is preparation, analysis, and the ability to adapt when the facts change or when the other side presents a better argument. Memory can make you quick. Judgment makes you effective, and that's the difference between fiction and reality. If you've watched Suits or really any legal drama, you'd think that every dispute ends up in a courtroom packed with spectators, a judge glaring down from the bench, and lawyers trading rapid-fire objections that sound like a boxing match with words. The courtroom, on TV, is the stage where all the drama unfolds. That's where the big reveals happen, where the smoking gun evidence is slammed onto the desk, and where the jury gasps in unison. It makes for brilliant storytelling. But here's the uncomfortable truth. In real life, almost none of that happens. Courtroom showdowns are the exception, not the rule. In fact, the vast majority of cases never make it to trial at all. Depending on the type of case, estimates suggest that around 95% settle before a judge or jury ever hears the arguments. And why? Because trials are risky, expensive, and time-consuming. For clients, that means legal fees can skyrocket, reputations can take a beating in public, and the outcome is completely uncertain. So what do most lawyers and clients do? They negotiate. They bargain. They settle. That's the real action in most cases. Not a dramatic trial, but quiet behind the scenes deal making. Even in criminal law, where people assume trials are the default, the reality is that plea bargains dominate the system. Defendants, even innocent ones, often plead guilty because the risk of losing at trial is simply too high. Prosecutors know this, defense lawyers know this, and the courts rely on it because there aren't enough judges or juries to try every case. If every defendant demanded a trial, the entire system would collapse under its own weight. Now, when trials do happen, they look nothing like television. Lawyers don't stand 2 feet away from witnesses, intimidating them with clever one-liners. They follow strict procedures, asking open or closed questions depending on whether it's direct or cross-examination. There's no room for surprise evidence dramatically introduced at the last minute. In fact, in most jurisdictions, evidence has to be disclosed well in advance. The idea of catching the other side off guard with a gotcha document would get you sanctioned, not celebrated, and let's not forget the atmosphere. Courtrooms in real life aren't buzzing with drama. They're often quiet, subdued, and at times boring. There are pauses while clerks shuffle papers. There are delays while technology malfunctions or a witness can't be found. Juries sometimes struggle to stay awake. The most dramatic moments usually involve legal arguments over technical rules of evidence, and those exchanges rarely make sense to anyone who hasn't studied law. But despite the lack of spectacle, there is something undeniably powerful about a real trial. The stakes are immense. Someone's freedom, livelihood, or millions of dollars may be on the line. The strategies are carefully crafted, and the lawyer's ability to frame their case persuasively truly matters. It just doesn't look like television because real justice doesn't rely on theatrics. It relies on process. So while TV dramas like Suits** convince us that the courtroom is the ultimate battlefield, the truth is that most of the real battle happens long before trial, in negotiations, in motions, and in preparation. The courtroom is just the tip of the iceberg, and when it does come to trial, it's less about the fireworks and more about discipline, patience, and sticking to the rules. The showdown is real, but it's not nearly as glamorous as Hollywood makes it seem. In legal dramas, discovery is portrayed as a lightning fast process. A lawyer flips through a file, finds a single page with a smoking gun, and suddenly the case is won. That one magical document, the hidden contract, the incriminating email, the secret recording, always appears right on time, usually discovered in the middle of the night by a heroic associate. It's cinematic, efficient, and deeply satisfying. But the reality of discovery is something else entirely. In fact, discovery is often the most grueling, expensive, and time-consuming part of litigation, and there is nothing glamorous about it. Discovery is the stage of a lawsuit where both sides exchange evidence, documents, and information relevant to the case. And unlike television, there's no shortcut. If you're suing a corporation, you might be handed not a folder but millions of emails, text messages, financial statements, contracts, and data logs. Modern discovery isn't about flipping through a file cabinet. It's about searching through massive databases with sophisticated software just to find a few relevant threads. Lawyers and paralegals can spend months, sometimes years, reviewing documents, tagging them, and deciding what's relevant or privileged. This process, called e-discovery, has become a legal industry of its own. Entire firms and tech companies exist just to manage the sheer scale of information modern cases produce. And it's not just about finding documents. It's about carefully following the rules. If you accidentally withhold relevant information, you could face sanctions. If you produce too much irrelevant data, you risk overwhelming your own side and missing the key points. Unlike the clean, perfect reveal on TV, real discovery is like wading through an endless swamp of information, hoping you'll spot the alligator before it bites. Then there's depositions, the sworn interviews of witnesses conducted during discovery. On television, these look like high-stakes interrogations, but in practice, they're long, technical, and methodical. Lawyers ask carefully structured questions, opposing counsel objects, and a court reporter types every word. A single deposition can take all day, sometimes several days, and the transcripts often run hundreds of pages. There are no dramatic confessions, no last-minute outbursts, just long hours of careful questioning designed to lock in testimony for trial. Another critical piece of discovery is expert witnesses. In real cases, experts review mountains of evidence to provide opinions on things like accounting, engineering, medicine, or even the reliability of data. On TV, the lawyer magically knows everything. In real life, experts are the backbone of proving complex issues. They are expensive, specialized, and central to making a case persuasive. The drama of discovery, if there is any, comes not from sudden reveals, but from the strategy of how information is used. Which documents do you highlight? Which depositions do you focus on? How do you frame the evidence in a way that makes your narrative the most believable? That's where the art comes in. The rest is hard, tedious work. So when television condenses discovery into a single shocking reveal, it skips the reality that discovery is often the case itself. Many lawsuits are won or lost not in the courtroom, but in the discovery process. It may not be flashy, but it's the foundation of modern litigation. Without it, the whole system would collapse. One of the elements that makes shows like Suits addictive is the way the characters constantly bend, twist, or outright break the rules to win. Whether it's Harvey bluffing his way into a deal, Mike sneaking around despite not having a law degree, or someone fabricating leverage to corner an opponent, shortcuts are everywhere. The message is clear. In the world of television law, the ends justify the means. Winning is what matters, and ethical lines are more like guidelines to be bent when convenient. It's exciting, it's glamorous, and it makes for great TV. But in reality, the legal profession is built on the opposite idea. Rules, ethics, and accountability are what keep the system functioning at all. Lawyers in the real world are bound by strict codes of professional conduct. These aren't suggestions. They're enforceable standards that govern everything from client confidentiality to truthfulness in court. A lawyer who knowingly lies to a judge, hides evidence, or misrepresents facts isn't just playing dirty. They're risking their entire career. Bar associations have disciplinary boards, and sanctions range from fines to suspension to permanent disbarment. In other words, real lawyers can't just pull a Harvey Specter whenever it suits them. The price for cutting corners is often far higher than losing a case. Take something as simple as honesty to the court. On television, bluffing is a form of art. In real courtrooms, it's a recipe for disaster. Judges have long memories, and credibility is everything. If a lawyer misrepresents even a small fact, they might win that day's battle, but they'll lose the trust of the court for every future case. And without credibility, even the strongest legal arguments fall flat. There's also the matter of client trust. Clients expect their attorneys to fight hard, but they also expect them to follow the rules. If a client finds out their lawyer engaged in misconduct, that trust can evaporate instantly. Worse, clients themselves can be dragged into legal consequences if their attorney plays dirty. So, while a television lawyer might cut corners to look clever, a real lawyer knows that protecting the client means keeping everything above board. That's not to say that real lawyers don't strategize aggressively. They do. They push the limits of arguments, test the boundaries of precedent, and sometimes use procedure as a weapon. But that's different from cheating. The line between being zealous and being unethical is clear in practice. One earns respect, the other earns disbarment. The irony is that in real law, ethics are not a hindrance. They're part of the strategy. Following the rules, being transparent with the court, and maintaining integrity are what build long-term credibility and influence. Winning one flashy battle by cheating is meaningless if it costs you your license or reputation. In television, shortcuts make the hero look powerful. In real life, shortcuts make you unemployed. So when legal dramas thrive on bending rules, they're selling you a fantasy. The real legal world is slower, messier, and far less glamorous, but it's also built on something more enduring than a single-case victory: trust in the system. Without that, the law collapses, and that's why shortcuts aren't just unrealistic, they're impossible to sustain. One of the reasons Suits captured so many fans is because it made the practice of law look glamorous. Perfectly tailored suits, high, rise offices with glass walls, and lawyers who seem to spend more time sipping scotch and trading witty banter than actually working. Every day is high drama, every case is $1 billion deal, every lawyer drives a luxury car and somehow has the time to juggle romance, rivalries, and late-night strategy sessions. It's a lifestyle as much as it is a career. And for many viewers, it creates the illusion that being a lawyer is synonymous with being rich, powerful, and stylish. But when you strip away the holly, wood polish, the reality of practicing law is often very different. Most lawyers aren't negotiating billion-dollar mergers or saving Fortune 500 companies from ruin. The vast majority work in small firms, government agencies, or solo practices, handling issues like divorces, landlord-tenant disputes, immigration paperwork, and small business contracts. Their offices don't overlook Manhattan. They're often in modest buildings, sometimes even strip malls, and instead of scotch and witty one-liners, their day-to-day is consumed with drafting motions, reviewing discovery, and responding to endless emails. For many, it's not glamorous at all, it's work. Important work, yes, but work that looks nothing like television. Then there's the question of lifestyle. On TV, lawyers seem to have limitless resources, teams of associates pulling all-nighters, endless budgets for investigations, and wardrobes that cost more than most people's annual salaries. In reality, many lawyers struggle with student loan debt for years, sometimes decades. They bill hours not because it's fun, but because they need to meet firm requirements to keep their jobs. Burnout, long hours, and stress are far more common than the sleek social lives shown on screen. Some lawyers love the challenge and thrive on the intensity, but the glamour fades quickly when you realize that late nights aren't the exception. They're the expectation. Even in the elite firms, the lifestyle isn't as polished as it looks. Associates at top-tier firms may earn impressive salaries, but the trade-off is brutal. 80 to 100-hour work weeks, constant availability, and little time for anything outside of work. The image of a lawyer sipping whiskey while admiring their skyline view is more often replaced by someone eating takeout at 1 a.m. under fluorescent lights, reviewing contracts for the 10th straight hour. That's the reality the camera doesn't show. And yet, despite the lack of glamour, the law has its own kind of appeal. It's not about fancy suits or cinematic drama. It's about responsibility, impact, and service. Lawyers help people in crisis, navigate complex systems, and resolve disputes that affect real lives. There is dignity in that, even if it doesn't sparkle on screen. The power of the profession isn't in how it looks, but in what it accomplishes. So while Suits and other shows sell us the dream of law as fashion and fireworks, the truth is much more grounded. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And for those who commit to it, that reality can be far more meaningful than any scripted drama.